Okay, I am going to ask Lynn to answer two more questions. One is another question on this issue of policy, and the other is a different kind of question. This question comes from a fairly well-known economist and author who also is working with this Stanford group. He says, Mr. LaRouche, 25 years ago, I was part of a debate on industrial policy, and it's old news that I was on the losing side. Neither Democratic presidents nor Republican ones accepted the idea that it mattered whether the United States had world-class industries. After all, we were told, we were becoming a service economy, and services were just as good as products. Most economists ridiculed industrial policy on the grounds that government was not competent to pick winners and that free markets would make the appropriate investment. Well, a quarter of a century later, most of those services have turned out to be financial services, and a lot of that sector turned out to be a big bubble, which has popped. The free market has made one blunder after another, and ever since the financial collapse began in earnest in the spring of 2007, government has been picking winners with taxpayer money, except that most of them are failing banks. A reading of American history reveals that the U.S. has had industrial policies all along, and it began with Alexander Hamilton's report on manufacturers. It continued into World War II and proceeded through the space program of John F. Kennedy. Government investment in biotech is another example. All of this, from Alexander Hamilton to John Kennedy, represents one big industrial policy. Go back and read books from the debate that I was part of. Blackstone and Harrison, The Deindustrialization of America. Steve Cohn and John Zeisman's Manufacturing Matters. You look at them today and they look prophetic. We all, including you, Mr. LaRouche, lost the political argument back then, but we were right all along. Now, with the economy facing a prolonged crisis, the fact is that unless we address this directly, then I do not see how we can find any way out. It's not just about banking policy or financial policy. It has to be about what it is we intend to do for our nation and for the world.
This is a fun one. This is a nice question because it prompts me to put on the table what I think are, we've said a lot of things here today, and I've said a lot of things earlier, but this is quite to the point. You know, the last lame effort of the United States to save its soul came when John F. Kennedy made a speech about doing something that was good to do because it was hard, the space program, the moon landing program. We have now, see, at that point, you had a division in the economy. To the extent that the space program, as Kennedy had actually revived it from near death. It was about to die. But he revived it by that speech. And despite the other things that intervened during the period up till the time that this crazy Nixon came in, but we actually, in the space program, had the most important accomplishments in economy, in our existence, occurred within this sector of the economy during that period. We reached the ironical point, however, with 1967-68, with a change in the budget under those conditions, in which we were sending things into space as to the moon, but we were using up the technology which had brought us there. That is, we had lost many of the technologies which had been developed under the space program earlier. This was the same thing that hit the Route 128 circuit in Massachusetts about that time, where all these satellite industries around MIT and so forth were involved in various branches of the space program. And they began to collapse. But their product went into space, leaving the thing that had produced this product behind. And you will find there's still today bits of technology kicking around in some private laboratory here or there, where it left in a dustbin from that period, and it's still around. Now, don't talk about economy the way most people talk about economists. And people who are decent economists really don't believe much in what's called economics today. They think actually in terms of much more concrete terms. And they don't use terms like industrial economy in any different sense than the distinction that Alexander Hamilton made with manufacturers back in that time. Infrastructure, agriculture, manufacturers, those are still the basic categories. Everything else is subsidiary. Now, the key thing that drives is science, physical science in particular. And physical science has many manifestations. It has the process of discovery, the process leading to a process of a discovery, and the spillovers of a process as the effects of the discovery come trickling down through the process of engineering and so forth, down the line. And what happens is we go essentially, the main line is an increase in the energy flux density of the sources of power employed and deployed. In other words, the transition from burning of coal to coke to petroleum and natural gas, then to nuclear power, the organization of electrical power, the changes in the uses and form of electrical power, for example, the development of the alternating current motor in New York City at the beginning of the 20th century was a change in the use of electricity which made possible the smaller independent machine which would operate the particular process in the production line. This was a revolution in productivity in the United States which hit about 1910, 1911, 1912. So you have various revolutions of this type in technology which break through and spill over into the industrial area, as in the New York area, where this introduction were these large steam-driven factories with belt-driven machines, and now you had even the electrical machine, which you had the individually powered machine under alternating current, and this was a big revolution at that time. It made possible, the whole machine tool industry was revolutionized over this period by result of this type of thing. So now you're always looking for revolutions, scientific revolutions in technology. And sometimes these are little, like the thing by electric alternating current improvement, and sometimes there are much more fundamental things. But always in every case, when mankind adopts a mission which says, look, we've been doing this for a long time. Isn't there a better way of doing it? And you put a science driver behind this thing. Can anybody come up with a better way? Look at this thing. We've been doing the same thing for 10 years now. Isn't it about time we came up with something new, something fresh? And if you have a project which is a national mission orientation, in all the great movements in history, economic history, come essentially from these revolutions, agro-industrial revolutions, revolutions in technology, mobilizations of people around technology. And it also goes to the question of how far can you go with a given technology? There are limits to any technology. These are the scientific principle limits of technology. Now we have before us a great change. The space program was part of it. We got to the moon, and after Nixon, we could never get to the moon again. He killed the moon. He gave us moonshine instead of moon. And we killed the space program. The space program is a shattered piece of crap today, in which you have elements of scattered in various parts of industry. Some guys have got a laboratory here, somebody's got something there. So this is the kind of thing we're dealing with now from the basement now. We have before us the prospect of industrialization of the moon, which was devised actually in the 1970s and early 1980s by a friend of mine, a friend of ours at the time. And that's still valid. Now, if you want to go further into space, if you want to go to higher levels of technology on Earth, you have to go into space. Because you have to have the challenge of going into space to get you to drive your technology upward and bring the benefits of driving it upward back to Earth and back to the benefits of mankind. We have also the question of exhaustion of various types of resources. They're not really the resources that are exhausted, it's the way in which they're concentrated. The richest resources are being drawn down. We have to use poorer quality of resources, but we get the same effect. We do that by technological progress. Now the project before us is, and everybody who knows anything about science or economy knows this, we have to have a project of completing the moon assignment, which was what the push was then with Kennedy. It was not just going to the moon. The purpose was to industrialize the moon. And these would be largely automatic industries, which required automatic technologies. It would be industries controlled from Earth with very few people because, a low gravitational, electromagnetic gravitational field is not the best thing for your health. And then the object is, what are we going to do with that? Well, we're going to go to Mars. And how would you go to Mars? Well, if you want to send something to Mars by inertial trajectory, you can do that. But I'd hate to send a human being out on an inertial trajectory for 200 to 300 days on a journey between the moon and Mars. It's not exactly, what's going to arrive there? Mr. Blob? So therefore, we have to think about accelerated flight. Well, we have on the moon a resource we recognize, helium-3. The sun has been depositing helium-3 as a mineral on the planet surface of the moon for a long time. There's big pits of ore of helium-3. Helium-3 happens to be a very useful item for space flight because it can be very directly applied to the propulsion process. We could technically, with helium-3 fusion, we could have a one-gravity flight from the orbit of the moon to the orbit of Mars, which will get you between the two planets within a few days. Now, there's some problems to be considered in venturing that, but if we can get to the planet from moon to Mars in several days by 1g gravitation or something comparable to that, that place is open to us, buddy. And whatever resources it has and whatever it means in the stepping stone to further things in space are now available to us. And once we adopt that policy, everything we've done in getting to Mars or getting to Mars now spills back on the planet as a revolution in everything we do on Earth. And the problems and challenges we face solve that. What this country needs, apart from reorganizing this economy in a sensible direction, we need to have, and there are a lot of people interested in this. We've got 10 nations now which are committed to a moon development project. 10 nations so far, committed actively. And I'm committed to a Mars arrival project. I've been committed to this for a long time, as some people know, since I did this half hour on mission to Mars back in 1988. The 88 campaign. And it's still valid today. I don't think I'm going to get there. I think I'm not in the best physical condition for that kind of travel at this time. It's not my sightseeing venture of the year, But anyway, probably in 20, 30, 40 years, we could have achieved not only the fulfillment of the moon development, but will have achieved in some way or the other. We will deal with Mars. We will conquer Mars. We will see what's up there. We'll see what use we make of it. And we will change the nature of man's conception of himself. Man will no longer think of himself as an earthbound land grubber. Not land lubber, but land grubber. And man will think of himself as man in the solar system. Because man is... Now, this means a change in relationships of human beings to human beings. You've got a human being on Mars who's working up there, a human being on Earth. It's a weekend travel to get up there and back and so forth. It's going to change the relationship in human life. All the technologies which are now used to do this will now be reflected in revolutions in technology back on Earth, including growing food stuff. I mean, growing vegetables on Mars. I mean, this is a real change in agriculture. It broadens your conception of what agriculture means. And that's how you do it. You have to adopt a national mission. The first national mission before us is to get this meathead in the White House and put him under suitable supervision with his consent, of course. He has to consent. But the consent will have to be induced by rather strong inducements. And the guy will survive. We'll protect him so the British don't kill him, because it's one of their disappointments. They like to blow up things that don't work for them. And that will give us, but we've got to think beyond that. Because I've got people who are now in their 20s, believe it or not. We still have produced babies. We still have people in their 20s. So we have a supply of them. Now they have, if we can get Obama under control, they have a life expectancy that goes into their 70s and 80s. And what are they going to do in the meantime? They're going to be the recipients and transmitters of this technological progress and what goes beyond it. And so we have to think about 2 or 3 generations ahead. I mean, don't you think about your grandchildren? Don't you think about even your great-grandchildren if you're lucky? Isn't that your mission in life? Isn't that your sense of continuity in life? So what's that? A generation. 25 years. 3 generations, 75 years. 4 generations, 100 years. What are you going to be doing in the next 100 years, people? If you're thinking about the future, if you care about your children and grandchildren that are coming after you, if you think about future humanity and locate your identity in what you're doing for them to make their lives possible, what do you think about? You think about where we're going to be 75, 100 years from now. And think how accurately we can forecast where we might be. What are our options? Where are we going? What we should be doing? Hey, what are you going to do when you reach your retirement age at age 75 or something, or 78 or 85, with improved health care? What are you going to be doing with yourself? What's your future? What kind of a world are you choosing? What kind of a solar system are you choosing to live in? And that's the way you do it. You don't do it by coming up with a list of this, a list of that. What are your priorities? You go out with a mission for humanity. This is not about jobs. This is not about income. This is about humanity. The difference between man and a beast. What are you as a human being going to do that certifies you're a human being and not shameful in the result in the eyes of your grandchildren? What are you going to accomplish with your life? We accomplished something. We got so far. How far are you going to take us? How much further are you going to take the human race? And that's what makes it work. It's motivation. How you choose to spend your life. Not pass it, but spend it. Expend it. To what purpose? To what end? What are you going to raise children for? To what end? For humanity. Why should you be remembered by people 2 generations from now? Why should you be respected a generation from now? What are you going to do to earn that respect? Your identity as a human being. And if you follow that line of thinking and use the space issue, space exploration as a parameter, a paradigm from our recent experience, which shows the difference Then you say, we don't talk about industrial policy as such. We don't talk about agricultural policy. We talk about human policy. We talk about the development and progress of the human species to a better life for future generations. And that takes scientific and technological progress, as well as the cultural progress which fosters creativity in the individual human mind. And that's our mission. What we're getting is people got with these crazy categories of values, crazy, stupid, dull. They bore me. Now let's talk about going to the moon. That doesn't bore me. Because that involves exactly what we have to do step by step in terms of science and technology to do each thing we have to do to get each step along the way. And that's our mission orientation. We take that mission orientation and you find it works just fine. We've just got to get this thing together a bit. Mr. President, you've got to change your ways, but it'll be good for you. You'll get a good reputation in the future. Just change your ways. The way I tell you. I guarantee you, you'll have a successful future. You just change your ways. Just a little bit. It won't be painful. You'll be in the Oval Office. You'll be comfortable. You'll be protected with great zeal. You'll have the privilege of being honored for what your office has done, what the presidency has done. Look at all the good things you get. Instead of being spit upon as you're being spit upon today, Mr. President. It's a much better future for you. Don't you think? I don't think you're going to go to Mars. I don't think you want to go to Mars. Maybe the people over there won't like you. But anyway. But in any case, that's the way we define a perspective, not in terms of these technicalities of industrial policy or something like that. If you can't spark the imagination and passion of people to accomplish something in the future, you're not going to get to the future.